Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway, the last radio hour of the week. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. He's president of Hillsdale College, and he is the equal of any Churchill authority on the planet. And I think he just, after we broke off, and I stayed in London a couple of days, I went out to Bletchley Park. I believe Dr. Arnn went to the war rooms with some people, but I also went into a place called Hatchard's, which I'd never been to before, Dr. Arnn. Magnificent bookstore, pretty close to, I don't know where it is. My wonderful wife found it, and I could have been in there all day. They had an entire section on Churchill that was, it was overflowing with things I wanted to buy and read. Have you been in there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's got a rival in New York called the Strand Bookshop, but it's one of the best. It's really great.
Well, I had my Father's Day present picked out for me and delivered, which is Churchill in Punch. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but every illustration of Churchill that ever appeared in Punch is collected in one book. It's a very big book. There were a lot of cartoons about Churchill.
Yeah, and see, they're good to look at, too, because there's history in there, because the early Punch cartoons about Churchill show him very skinny. And he was a slight little thing, and he really didn't get fat till he got to be 50. And then he became the guy we know. But, it's, they would portray him in the early days as he's always leaning forward, and he's quick, and he's slight. And he looks, when they want him to be sinister, they can make him look that way. And then later he becomes rotund. And so don't fix your memory entirely on Winston Churchill being a bit tubby.
No, I call him prosperous in his later years. That's what I refer to when people get a little bit round. But I found a picture of him jumping on the train in South Africa, an illustration from the newspapers of that day. I don't know if Harley found it or if he found the map I've got of Churchill's escape. But we are in the penultimate week on My Early Life, which has been a magnificent romp. Next week we'll talk about his entry into Parliament and Joe Chamberlain and all that, but I want to deal with the escape and the war. And when we left off, he had failed to get away, and he'd been taken into custody by the Boers, who might as well have shot him. And they said, oh, no, we don't get a son of a lord very often. He gets taken to a prison camp with the other officers, and no sooner is he there than he plans on getting away, and he makes a break for it with Haldane and another guy. Pick up the story. You really wouldn't believe this unless it was Winston Churchill and very well documented.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll tell you that I spent several days in England after the cruise, and I went to London and Oxford and Cambridge and discovered there's an underground in all of those places of people trying to save those great universities. Oh. And Hillsdale is well known to them, and I was giving talks to people like that. And I met 6 students from Hillsdale who are getting doctorate degrees in Oxford. Anyway, I also met a lady, and she's a wonderful lady, and she doesn't like Winston Churchill because her great-grandfather was in the Boer War and said, and this is a story that comes from the time, that Winston Churchill got away and left his colleagues behind. And we're at dinner, and she's telling this story, and I'm going to tell the real story in a second, but she said that they dug a tunnel for weeks, and they all worked on it and risked the collapse of the tunnel. And then Churchill went first, and that they heard something, and it alarmed the guards, and he carried on without his friends. And in their family, they could never forgive that. And I said, well, yeah, that story is true, except for the part about the tunnel.
Well said.
Yeah. But what happened was they're there, right? And Churchill is this. First of all, I people who read this chapter, you should notice how human it is. Churchill talks about being afraid, being bewildered, blind luck, because he was saved by blind luck. And his up and down mood swings, he explains all that. It's a very human thing, right? It's what we would all go through, right? I don't know if we'd go through it as well as he did, but what happened was, first of all, at the time he's captured, he does amazing feats around this armored train. It left everybody agape what he did. We talked about that. And then he says to Haldane, thank you for letting me do that. The Derbyshire Light Infantry has seen it, and now I'll be elected to Parliament. You can see what was on his mind, and that's what happened. And so now they put him in there, and he immediately starts writing letters and articles, which articles eventually got out. And he's saying, I'm not a soldier. I wasn't armed. He wasn't armed because he'd taken off his gun because it was in his way while he was working on the train. But never mind that. And they judge, yes, you did a lot there. You're a danger. We're keeping you. Well, he can't bear being in prison. He just hates it, and was sympathetic to prisoners. Had been already in his life, was for the rest of his life. And so he gets involved in the escape plans, and they notice that there's a structure in a corner of this wall that goes around the state model schools, which is where they're being housed. The officers are being housed. Or the private soldiers are in a sports stadium nearby. And there are, quite a lot of them. And so they start watching these guards, and they figure out that there's a place on the wall that's not very well lit and partially shielded by a structure, a lavatory. And so if they could watch the guards, they could, and the guards are 15 yards away. They could skinny up on the wall and go on the other side and hide in the trees on the other side, in the bushes by the wall. And so they go over there to do that. They try it one night. They can't get their gumption up. So they resolve they're going to do it the next night. And so they go, and Churchill goes first. And he records that he waits for an hour and that they don't come. And the reason is apparently they didn't get an opening. Now, it's worth saying that Haldane was later critical of Churchill over this episode. So the story that my friend in England told me originates in something that was thought at the time, especially after the time. Haldane didn't say that immediately. He said that 2 or 3 years later. And Churchill became famous over this, right? He was the rage. At the time that he escaped, the war was going badly, and here's a victory. This guy got away, and everybody knows who he is because he's the most published journalist on the subject of these several wars in which he was, including this one. And so, he gets over, and he waits and waits, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have a map. He's got some chocolate bars. And so he decides, I got no idea where to go, but there are railways, and I know that one of the railways goes to Portuguese territory. And so I'm just going to follow the railway, which will be guarded, and try to dodge the pickets that are guarding every bridge. And so he does that, and he's, running out of food. He has moments of being cocky and moments of being desperate.
He notes that his sole companion was a giant vulture who took an inordinate interest in his condition.
Isn't that a good passage? So you're sitting there, you're hungry. If the Boers see you, they're going to shoot you, or they're going to put you back in prison, which I think he may have thought was worse. He implies it. And this time he thinks they'll put him in the general population, and he won't be able to read and write and stuff. So he can't bear the idea of that. How long is this war going to be? And how long, because I'm a young man in a hurry, and I can't be wasting months here in prison. It ain't right, And so he keeps on, right? And he follows the railway. He doesn't know for the longest time whether he's on the right railway. But then the sun comes up one morning, and he sees which way is east, and the railway's pointing toward it, and he says, at least I picked the right railway.
Indeed, he did pick the right railway, and I'm very glad he did. We'll tell you more about that on the other side. Remember, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu.
Hey there. Today, I want to tell you about the Hillsdale K-12 Classical Education Podcast. This unique show explains how children benefit from an American classical education. Whether you're a teacher, student, or parent, you'll find something of value on the show. You'll hear from teachers and administrators from schools around the country, as well as Hillsdale professors and friends who are leading the effort to revive the American tradition of K-12 education. When you listen, you'll learn all about classical education, what it is, how to teach it, and why it matters today. And there are dozens of back episodes on specific topics, like teaching Singapore math, reading great books, and even understanding how athletics is critical to a child's development. Listen every Monday on podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. We were talking about Winston Churchill's escape from the Boers, and he found the right railway, Dr. Arnn, when we left off.
He manages to jump on a train for a while.
He does. He manages to jump on there's an illustration of him boarding the train, looking in both ways, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's quite dangerous, actually, when the train's moving right along.
Yeah, it was going fast, and he thought, well, I made that work. Skinned himself up, his shoes, his toes, and he gets in there and he rides a few hours into the night, and then he gets off, and he says, "I'll travel by train at night." And by now he has the experience of getting on one, so he's figured out how to do it. And so he says, and he noticed that the trains go very slow up a grade. And so he finds a rise, and he finds one with a curve on it, so that and then he gets on the outside of the curve, because when the engine goes around the curve, the engineers won't be able to see him. And it's going to be going slow, and I'll just walk right up and get on that thing, and that's how I get to Portuguese territory. And then a train doesn't come. So he gets, no trains. Wonder if these trains go at night. Don't think I can afford to try to do this in the daytime. So he walks some more. He looks at a station early in the morning. He sees that a lot of trains are laid up there and not going anywhere. And he says, they're not traveling at night. There goes that plan. So then he's desperate again. And then he starts walking toward a fire, and he thinks it's a fire of Kaffirs. And those are black people or mixed race people in South Africa who don't live as well as the white people. And interject about that the tribal lands in South Africa are discrete. The Zulu nation, which fought a great war and battle against the British, they've got their own king and stuff, and they're not regulated so much by the South African Dutch Boer government. But the Kaffirs are black and mixed race people who live among them. And so he thinks, that's a fire out in the plains there, the veldt, and I'll walk up to that. Maybe they'll be friendly. I've been on their side. He doesn't say that in this, but he does say it in a book called London to Ladysmith, that he thought that what the war was really about with the Boers was the British stood for the equality of the Kaffir.
Oh.
And so that's why he thought they might be friendly. And he gets there, and it's not a fire out on the veldt. It's a mining camp with some houses around it, 5 or 6. And he thinks to himself, I'm running out of gas here. Some of these mines are run by British people who've gotten permission to stay. I'm going to knock on the door. And he knocks on the door. Now, this story is widely publicized at the time of his escape. And this book is written 30 years later. And now he tells the names of the people who helped him. And the fact that people helped him, he didn't tell them at the time. The man's name was John Howard. And he knocks on the door. And
he was the manager of the
Head.
Transvaal Collieries. So he's an Englishman.
Yeah, that's right. And see, he's got permission to stay with others in that encampment because he knows how to run the mine. And he lets Churchill in. He suspects who he is early. He's got a pistol. He lays it on the table. And he's asking skeptical questions. And Churchill says, maybe I should tell you the truth. I'm Winston Churchill. And John Howard said, this house, these houses, this particular house, best of all, is the only place for 20 miles that you could have knocked on a door and not been turned in. So that's, blind luck.
Remarkable.
And Churchill's life was kind of like that. He had plenty of misfortune, too.
But the even more astonishing thing, he's got to hide there for a while. So Mr. Howard takes him down into his mine, where he's met by Mr. Dusnall. And Mr. Dusnall is from Oldham. And if people remember a few weeks back, that's where Churchill ran and lost his first race for Parliament. And Mr. Dusnall grabs him in an iron grip and says, I'll vote for you next time. And so wild to run into a constituent on an escape route in the middle of South Africa.
And they did vote for him next time, too.
They did.
He won next time. Yeah, in Oldham, and his first seat. And so they put him down in the mine. The mine, at one point, they have a plan. First of all, there are rats all over the mine. And they put the rats in there to scavenge and keep it from becoming, foul from organic material rotting. And they've imported these rats. Churchill likes the story that he reported about these rats, and he got somebody who said, there's no such rat, none in South Africa. But in the letter that the man wrote him, he said, I believed that, and I'd been saying it to people for a long time. But then I went to South Africa, and sure enough, there are those rats. I apologize to you. Yeah. And they, ate his candles the first night. He had to protect his food from them. They scurry across him.
But he doesn't mind. He does not mind rats.
He's not afraid of rats. He hasn't, 1984 has not quite been published yet, so he doesn't know to be afraid of them yet. But at one point they have a plan. They take him on, they go down there. He's a feature, right? These British guys who are, living in South Africa. And it's kind of cool to have him there. And they take him on tours, and they take him to places where the shafts are rather shallow so he can see a little daylight. And then they have an emergency plan that if they find out the Boers are going to come and search the mine, and the Boers suspected that the British nationals who were living in that area would be hiding Churchill, if they came and searched the mine, there's a place where the water comes up in a shaft all the way to the ceiling. And if you swim through that, you come up in another shaft that's dry, and they'll never think to look there. If you get the signal, swim under that, go hide. And so that goes on for several days, and they feed him. They have to, they've got servants in the house of questionable loyalty. And so they have to, at one point, Howard goes 20 miles to get a chicken from somebody else because they don't want the staff to notice that food is disappearing from the house, and the staff is in charge of the food, right? And so it's a big scheme, and these guys, you can just think of these guys because it's treason because they're subject to the authority. They're going to get shot if they get caught. And Churchill says no. When he learns that, he says, no, I'm just going to go. Give me a pony and I'll strike off. He liked that idea. Strike off east and right across the country. And no, they won't hear of it.
And it's a good thing they didn't hear of it because it was a close-run thing anyway. More coming up on Churchill. The Hillsdale Dialogues are all found at hughforhillsdale.com. Everything Hillsdale, including Dr. Arnn's own podcast, a great one recently with Bishop Robert Barron, are found at hillsdale.edu. Stand by. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is in the house. We're talking about Winston Churchill and, of course, My Early Life, the book we've spent so many weeks on. It's always engrossing. And right now he's plotting with how to get out of Boer-controlled territory back to a safe harbor in Portuguese-controlled territory, Dr. Arnn.
So they finally concoct this scheme that they're going to be shipping some cotton bales out of that place, and they're going to conceal him in them with a little enclave in the middle of the stacks. And those are going to be covered on the car with a tarpaulin. And it's unlikely when they search the train at the border that they will take off the tarpaulin and look among the bales. And so Churchill he doesn't like this. He thinks, he's been thinking for several days, I'm home free. These guys are going to get me out of here. But now he's got to go in a dark place for some unknown amount of time, and he's got to wait to be captured again.
And he has to stay awake.
Appalled.
He's afraid he's going to snore if he falls asleep.
Except, that's a very good, Churchill has a real gift about this, right? Churchill said that he resolved that he mustn't sleep in case he snored, and then he fell into an immediate and comfortable slumber.
And he wakes up in Portuguese territory. It's a remarkable story. But I gotta make sure I get to the end of this, because he says youth seeks adventure, journalism requires advertisement. Certainly I had found both, and I became, for a time, quite famous. And I wrote in my notes, Dr. Arnn, was he ever unfamous after this incident?
Well, eventually not. He writes this book in the 1930s, and he's famous. But in 1940, he became the most famous person for really the rest of his life until 1965. So he'd reached a high level of fame for a very young man, and he was probably that famous. But see, first of all, people are reading his articles, and his articles are good. You know, they're fun to read. You should read Churchill's journalism. There's 1,000 of them. And so they know him from that. But now he's the most important figure in the war for a time, and there's not good news to report. Eventually the British would win the war with, complete victory, no, but victory. And so a hero to seize on was a very cool thing.
Well, he's out.
He did get a lot of mileage out of it.
He gets out, he goes back to Durban, and he goes to see the commander-in-chief who he had come over with, Buller, and Buller says, congratulations, young man, great, what can I do for you? Give me a commission in the South African Light Horse. And this throws Buller for a loop, and eventually he agrees. So he is once again in Her Majesty's service and armed, and also a war correspondent, and he's critical of the war's management. His mother shows up, and his brother shows up, and it's wild.
Yeah. He was, because see, the reason he was not a journalist on the armored train is that in response to him, they had issued a regulation that soldiers could not write for the press while serving in active duty. So he would give up his commission and write a bunch of articles. Then he gets to South Africa, and he's got his fame. The first thing he does is parlay his fame, as you say, with Bullard into a recommission. But then he continued to write again against the regulation.
Yeah.
So this guy if this guy was a student at Hillsdale College, and I've got some like that, he'd be troublesome. He'd be troublesome in just the right way, or maybe a little more than that.
Troublesome in just the right way, or maybe, I love that. Dr. Larry Arnn will be right back. Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogues are all collected at Hugh for Hillsdale.com. If you're just coming into the middle of this, you want to catch back up on everything Churchill did in my early life, they're all there. We're on part 14. We have one more week to go.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. We are deep into Winston Churchill's book about my early life. That's the title of it. And now he's taking us to another battlefield, yet another one. He goes to a battle which I had not heard of until I reread this book. It's been a long time since I've read it. The Battle of Spion Kop. And it's sort of like those battles he got into in the Afghanistan frontier and in Cuba and in Sudan. People are shooting real close to him. His brother gets it in the calf, and he gets him out of there. But it's a wipeout. He loses the battle. He does not like the way this war is running. But he eventually gets to the siege, and he said, I have always been against the pacifists during the quarrel and against the jingoes at its close. And he's not triumphalist at the end of this thing.
No, he tended not to be. And, he was one of the first to want to forgive the Germans after the Second World War. But that's right. It's not scholarship, this punditry that's risen up about Churchill as a warmonger, they just don't read any Churchill, right? Because Churchill wants peace. I think our current president, he wants peace, right? And his warlike actions are calculated to restore peace. Well, I think that's the way Churchill lived his life, too, and I think I can prove it. I think I have done. But, here, he doesn't want to fight with those Boers. The Boers were very good fighters, and they led Britain on a dance for years. And he wants to get along with them. And,
he points out that after the relief of Ladysmith, which we'll get back to next week to bring us up to the khaki election, but as we draw to a close here, he's out in the field fighting again, and he's trapped again. He's getting away again, but he's going to get caught up when out of nowhere appears a British scout on a pale horse. Death in Revelation, but life to me. And he's he has so many close calls. It's the most improbable life unless one considers providence. And it was interesting to me to tie it back to President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. There have been overtures of providence and providence guiding hand for the last month. I don't know if you've been picking up on them, but it sure does seem to me that Donald Trump believes he's on a mission.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, sounds like White Earp and Churchill and Donald Trump have something in common. People are shooting at him all the time. And only Donald Trump was ever wounded, and only slightly. And, that's I should mention about Trump, about Providence, that Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, if you know what he's like, he's a very firm man, and he's argumentative. And he says,
irascible as can be, very irascible.
He is. I like him. He says that Trump. He says he was turning to look at my chart and show it to people. I saved his life. He should give me credit.
All right, let me close with this. He writes, and I want this, wherever we departed from it, a Roman maxim, which is I've always been, those who can win a war well can rarely make a good peace, and those who make a good peace would never have won the wars. And he lived that. He really did believe that the people who were triumphant always fumbled it away. Was he aware? I'm going forward because I don't think we covered it when we did his World War I series. Was he aware that Versailles was being fumbled when Versailles was being fumbled after the Great War?
Oh, yeah. Desperate about it. He quotes, he writes a book called The Aftermath, in which he goes into that and thinks that was foolishness itself. And the main structure, the main provisions of the thing were foolish. And that had to do with Woodrow Wilson that had to do with the animus of the domestic populations, including the British. And so he quotes, in the aftermath, he quotes a French general who says, "This is not a peace treaty. This is a 20-year armistice." And it lasted 21 years. And so that's right. Churchill wanted to be, what are his four things at the beginning, we'll get to them, of the Second World War: in peace, goodwill; in war, resolution; in defeat, defiance; in victory, magnanimity. Well, that's the time, right? I mean, I like what Trump has said about the Iraqis, right? Iranians, sorry. He says, look, they've got a lot of stuff over there. They've got a good population. They got oil. They can live very well, and we'd love to help them. And he's not saying the thing that means certain war, which we have under the principle of consent of the governed, we don't have the authority to tell other people how to govern themselves. And John Adams says that famous thing, we don't go abroad looking for dragons to slay. And so Trump is trying to make a peace, and I hope that we can get one. And, the rumors in the paper today are that there's big announcements coming about the expansion of the Abraham Accords. And that would be cool if it happens, right? Get a bunch of those Arab countries.
But, Dr. Arnn, I don't know if Churchill had critics like Trump does. I'm not comparing the two men, but I am comparing their critics. There are some people who are so irrationally disturbed by Donald Trump that they will not credit the last month. And by Bibi Netanyahu. They will not credit it as other than a step towards the march towards dictatorship. I'm not going to give any airtime to the name of that TDSer. In fact, let's move on. We want to get back to the main subject at hand. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn to finish up this week's edition of the Hillsdale Dialogue about Winston Churchill's My Early Life. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue about to continue. I want to remind you that in 2 weeks, next week we're going to finish up, or in 2 weeks we're going to finish up the Winston Churchill book, My Early Life, and we're going into a Second World War collection. There are 6 volumes that Churchill wrote on the Second World War. They're box sets. You can buy them used. They're everywhere. Go and get them and get started. We'll spend a lot of weeks in that, and we'll learn a lot from studying the life and decision-making process of the greatest statesman of the last century, Winston Churchill. I also want to remind you that all things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. Dr. Arnn, we went to break. We're talking about the enemies that Donald Trump, Bibi Netanyahu have. Did Churchill have people like that who just could not evaluate him?
Yeah, well, he was much hated, and still is today, by the way. And that's just the way of things, right? First of all, if you do a lot, and you do well, you'll have a lot of friends, and you'll have a lot of enemies. And he lived a very significant life, and so there's a huge amount of tragedy in that life. And let's say that, heaven forbid, Iran makes a dirty bomb with this nuclear material they've got, which is apparently at 60% enrichment, whatever that means. Let's say they make a dirty bomb and set it off in some American city. That'll be Donald Trump's fault, right? And we'll lose sight of the fact that they did that. And that's, there's a huge burst of scholarship. When I was there in England working with Martin Gilbert, I actually worked with him for 30 years or more, but 40. But Menachem Begin asked Margaret Thatcher in a receiving line, "Why didn't you bomb Auschwitz?" And that led to a bunch of books, one of them written by Martin Gilbert about why the Allies didn't bomb Auschwitz. And the reasons for that are complicated, and it's a war, and they got a lot to think about. But Martin Gilbert, the reason his book is the best is because it's the most careful, but also he didn't forget that the person who killed the Jews was actually Adolf Hitler and not Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill.
And so
the proximate cause is the proximate cause. Yeah, we don't need to go. Yeah. We don't have to go for finding bad guys when the bad guys are right in front of us. On that note, Dr. Arnn, next week we come back to conclude my early life and then thereafter. You might want to get your 6-volume set. They're everywhere available. They won't cost you but $10 at a local thrift shop because it may be the most widely produced series of books in the post-World War II era, other than the Bible, which is Churchill's magisterial 6-volume history of World War II, which we'll tackle. But first, we got to get him into Parliament. First, you've got to stand for election and actually win. And we'll do that next week on the next Hillsdale Dialogue. Dr. Larry Arnn, thank you. Harley, Adam, and Generalissimo, thank you so much. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Talk to you on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.